I'm Mark Laux, Extension Weed Scientist with the Ohio State University. I'm standing in front of a study where we're looking at combinations of glyphosate and glufosinate or Liberty at some different rates applied alone and then applied in a mixture and then applied sequentially, with the Liberty applied 2 days before the Roundup and the Roundup applied 2 days before the Liberty. We did this study last year under kind of bigger weed conditions and less ideal weather and kind of had mixed results. I think we got a hint of some antagonism between the glyphosate and the glufosinate, and overall the data showed that you were better to apply them separately with a edge towards applying the glyphosate before you apply the glufosinate. If you think about that, that makes sense in terms of having a systemic get in and having a day or two before you come back and use a contact herbicide. So we repeated the study this year. Better growing conditions, smaller weeds, so I think everything's working a little bit better. I'm just going to walk through and show you really quick the plots that matter here. So we have glufosinate here at 32 ounces of Liberty. There's no pre-herbicide here, and we have giant ragweed, giant foxtail, barnyard grass, lamb's quarter, and redroot pigweed. Redroot pigweed and lamb's quarter are not typically something you're going after with Liberty because your residual herbicides usually take it out, but you can see the Liberty worked pretty well here. It actually did, at this rate, 32 ounces, get most of the barnyard grass. You can see some lamb's quarter coming through. There's actually a few Johnson grass plants, barnyard grass plants back in there. So that's probably a little bit better than we'd expect Liberty to perform in this weed population without a residual sometimes. Then you have glyphosate here at 32 ounces of Power Max. We do have glyphosate resistant giant ragweed in here, but it's variable and it is rate dependent. It's the type of resistance where you get 70% response, so if you bump rate you get a little better response, and it's essentially clean. You can see one velvet leaf plant out in there, so that looks good. The next three are combinations of 11, 16, or 32 ounces of Power Max with 32 ounces of Liberty. Our philosophy being if you have to use Liberty for control of glyphosate resistant weeds, you're going to have to probably use that rate to make it work. I'm going to skip on down here just to the sort of the punchline, which is 32 ounces of Liberty mixed with 32 ounces of Power Max. And the Power Max, the glyphosate by itself was essentially clean, and the Liberty had a few plants in it. Both of them did pretty well on the grasses, and actually what you see in here with the two combined is you do start to see some barnyard grass in here. You can see that. You see some barnyard grass coming through. You see some small lamb's quarter plants coming through, and a few other things. So you could start to get a hint. One of our goals here is to see if we have antagonism and if we can resolve that by applying separately versus applying together. And so you can start to see, yes, these are 32 and 32, and we did see cleaner results up there with the Power Max, especially on the barnyard grass. So you can start to see that mixed together, they don't necessarily always work well together. So the two other plots that I'll show you are where we had 22 ounces of Power Max and 32 ounces of Liberty glufosinate applied two different ways. In this plot, the glyphosate was applied first. We waited a couple of days and sprayed glufosinate. And you can see there's a couple small lamb's quarter in here. One really small pigweed, but essentially there's no grass, and this plot is basically 98–99% control of everything. So keep that in mind as we go down to the next plot. So this is the opposite, where we applied the glufosinate first, waited 2 days, and then came back with the 22 ounces of Power Max. And you can see right off it's way dirtier. You got pigweed, you got lamb's quarter, you got a bunch of barnyard grass coming through here. Still did fine on the giant ragweed, but I think it illustrates what I just mentioned, was that if you're going to do a sequential like that, ideally you want to use a systemic first. So the study overall over a couple of years, I think, has shown us that those two herbicides don't necessarily work and play well together in a mix. They can, I think, depending on rate and depending on weather. The sequential can look, I think, a little more consistent, but if you're going to do that, the glyphosate should probably be applied first and wait a few days and apply the glufosinate.